Mishcon Academy digital sessions.
This afternoon we are privileged to have with us two leaders, a lawyer, James Libson, the managing partner of Mishcon Reya, in conversation with an entrepreneur, Sir Tim Smit, the co-founder and executive chairman of the Eden Project near St Austell in Cornwall, on the topic of purpose, leadership and disruption.
Tell us what your function is, what the Eden stand at, where it is, and what your function is going to be at COP26.
Publicly stated position is that we're there to start discussions, to make people feel hopeful about stuff, to draw people together. The environment movement as a whole, it's been very good at telling you what's wrong with the world, but appalling at actually suggesting what you might do to put it right. A friend of mine who's the boss of Greenpeace was saying it's really difficult to move your whole way of thinking in terms of how we're going to have a positive discussion. What are we going to recommend as opposed to what are we going to knock down? And it's very interesting because Eden's going through a position at the moment of trying to explore what does provocative actually mean. We fall in love with words like that, and you've got to be very careful that you don't behave like a sixth former and think that provocative means you've just got to insult people and be rude about people who might be trying their best but failing. And then you've got to ask the question, which as a citizen, I know you're a B Corps here, as a citizen, what is your role in that relationship? Have you got a duty as opposed to, for example, not knocking government for its failure to clean up rivers? Let's take an example, yeah? If the Environment Agency isn't cleaning up rivers and we're putting an awful lot of stuff in the rivers which we shouldn't be, and it's really, really bad, is your position to be yet another person knocking the situation, or is your position to be a grounder of lightning, to build a consortium of people around you which enable you to support government to do the job which actually the minister would love to be able to do, but is actually hamstrung in not being able to do? And I think a lot of us in the environment movement need to really reflect on whether the kind of late 60s generation rebellion mode is the right one in an era where people actually don't necessarily know the answers, and can we help, as opposed to trying to burn the house down.
Well, I wanted to come to this later on, but maybe it's an apposite moment to talk about current protests and the legislation that the Conservative Party was talking about passing at conference this week against protesters blocking motorways, and whether you consider that type of protest to be helpful or provocation, or it has to be there in the mix.
I will quote my dear friend, my late dear friend, Richard Sambrook, who set up Friends of the Earth, who, do you remember the riots in Gothenburg all those years ago where people were throwing bricks through the window of McDonald's and whatever? He said to me after a couple of glasses of wine, he said, I feel so embarrassed that I think they're doing it for the wrong reasons, but if they weren't doing it, no one would be interested in talking to me about the problem. And I think this is the fundamental hypocrisy we all suffer from. We need a stage in which to talk about these things. How do you get that stage if someone braver than you isn't doing something rather awkward? So do I approve of a lot of what Extinction Rebellion are doing or Insulate Britain are doing? The point is nonetheless there that we need people to represent our outrage while we're doing other stuff, to buy the stage room and the screen time to talk about these issues, because it is iniquitous that we don't address stuff. We seem to brush stuff under the carpets, and we also have managed to phrase protest as if somehow it was a political position to the left or the right, as opposed to a moral compass thing, which is actually, it's just wrong. And I think that's one of the big issues of those of us who are in the establishment. I hate to say I'm in the establishment, but I can't really help it now. But the truth is, the establishment has got a lot to answer for not being angry enough within its own echo chamber to throw out of it, to expel from its establishment those who are doing things that are morally wrong. Because strangely, I think capitalism has done a huge disservice by protecting those who would seek to poison the things which should be of benefit to our children and children's children and so on. What benefit can there be to any of us to actually protect water companies that do not filter their water and allow bad chemicals and shit to go into our rivers and so on, to name but one of many things? It's the same as putting noxious substance into the air. Why are we protecting people like that? If we know from our education that this is bad, why on earth are these people given any respect? It is treason to us as a species. Lawyers are really, really important in this. I'm really excited about the involvement of a lot of lawyers. I don't know whether your firm is directly, but I know many of you will be supportive of it. We say developing the crime of ecocide. It's only when you get the weaponry that you can start to get structure and governance around some of these moral issues, that you can start to get any leverage that can reinforce the protest of people sitting under bridges and whatever. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I think it's a really interesting discussion about who are your champions for your views. I don't think we're ready for what is coming. I mean, we talk about, again, if you want a clear mountain stream thinking to actually really knock your spots off, and you want to invest 6-7 hours of your life in something that will change you, download the reports by an organization called Rethink X. 5 reports: the future of energy, the future of transport, the future of food and farming, the future of humanity, and revisiting climate change. I promise you, after you've downloaded those and read them, you will never think the same way ever again. Because as we speak about farming, for example, we're talking about regenerating agriculture at the moment. And you look at what's happening in the West Coast of America. Last year's turnover of clean meat, that's vegetable produced meat, 1.8 billion, set to double this year. China is about to enter the fray. And what you find is middle-aged men who are always wrong, telling you yesterday maybe have a good burger or something like that. I promise you, by the end of next year, you'll be able to have steaks, you'll be able to have lamb chops, you'll be able to have fish, you'll be able to have chicken and turkey and all those things. And you're going to see a complete revolution in land use. Complete revolution. What does that mean? If China, over the next 2 years, decides it's going to move away from meat, but market artificial meat as if it was meat and a status product, it means that 80% of Brazil's soy supply, which goes to China, will then cease to be wanted. Suddenly, there might be a market for rainforests. I'm being serious. I mean, it's really interesting. And I talk to people about fermentation technology, something I didn't know anything much about until recently. But effectively, it's using the fermentation that we use for distilling, but it's fermenting fresh air, because in fresh air, there's an awful lot of stuff. And if you question an awful lot of stuff, go outside, walk along your London streets tonight and ask yourself a really big question as you look at those London plane trees. How come they're so effing big? And you'll think, my school days, they eat through their roots, don't they? How could they get that much nutrient from the underground? They don't. They get a little bit of their food from underground, but most of it comes from the air, and most people aren't taught that. So anyway, these fermentation vessels are able to ferment, for example, dairy protein at 30% of the cost of ordinary dairy. So if I was a stockholder in agriculture, I think I might be moving out of dairy pretty damn quick.
And you also said that you felt that we would be carbon neutral in this country within 10 years.
I said we could be completely energy independent by the year 2030. We've moved a long way. The Eden Project has moved an awful long way from wanting to just entertain visitors. We had last March, not the one we just had, we had a really frank conversation as a team. In 20 years' time, would we be happy to still have 1.1 million visitors every year and be making a surplus of 4 million quid and have everybody telling us it was education by visionaries? Or would we be a bunch of losers? Answer, we realised we'd be a bunch of losers. Because what happens is you then exchange wanting to be activist and changing opinion with running a corner shop. And actually, the really important thing for Eden to do is to be a shop window for people to actually feel that they can do stuff and also demonstrate that you can do stuff. So if we were all sitting right now in Cornwall at the moment, and I was here or David was there, we'd be saying, you know what, 4,100 meters under my ass, there's a drill. And that drill is hitting temperatures of 155 degrees. And we are going, within a year, we're going to be completely independent energy-wise at Eden. Our country has been completely perverted by the influence of big oil, because the interests of big oil were that this was a technology that should be seen as risky. No one actually pointed out the complete hypocrisy of the fact we're using oil technology, drills. And the reason it's so expensive is because the oil companies that have control of the contracts for these drills make it really expensive. So de facto, it's expensive. But guess what, guys? As demand for fossil fuel goes down over the next 10 years, because we've all signed contracts for that, haven't we? We believe that's going to happen. The cost of drills is going to go down, which means that actually you'll be able to get heat anywhere in Britain. You just have to drill deeper for it. And what that is the thing that we've been waiting for since we discovered coal. It's baseload. It means that when the sun don't shine and the wind don't blow, you've still got energy, really powerful energy, both for heat and for power, depending on how deep you've gone. Which means that it is completely within our control to be, as a nation, completely energy independent. I think probably within a period of 15 years, we could be completely food independent. The way I think it's going to happen is this. I think Eden, along with others, we're going to be successful with the geothermal. It's going to suddenly see the price of geothermal going down. It's going to see grids develop, which are local, which they should have been anyway. We've got centralized systems at the moment, which are a throwback to World War II. You're going to see every town, every city in this country develop independent mains and so on. And you're going to see that also start to happen with cooperatives for agriculture. And suddenly you're going to see muscular localism. Up until now, localism has been a kind of derivative of parochialism. But I think the plague that we've just gone through has changed an awful lot of people's minds about where they want to live, how they want to work. They also probably feel better balanced. I know there's been a lot of well-being issues to do with people being isolated on their own, but those who weren't isolated on the other ones are realizing, you know, it's actually a human thing to spend a lot of time with your family rather than get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, go to work, come back late at night, kiss them and they go to sleep, and at the weekends you can maybe see them. What kind of world have we built? When are we going to wake up to realize that we have created madness and we've called it civilization? And I think if the technology is going to do anything for us, it is not about making us more efficient. It's going to be about buying us the time to remember that we are creatures and actually we thrive on breaking bread together and family and laughing a lot.
What's the unique aspect of our education system that you criticise?
The unique aspect of the British Isles is we're the only nation in the world, I think, where our schools education system is dominated and the gatekeepers of the universities. And I think it's incredibly sinister, incredibly bad. Our education system is broken. Everybody knows it's broken. How bonkers is it? You are a little creature being taught about survival and the future, and you're not taught to grow anything, how to cook anything. You're not necessarily taught anything about how your body works. What the hell's the rest about then? I mean, if you think about it, how mad is that? No, you must learn maths and arithmetic and the great English kings. I think most people, teachers and academics, would warrant that the over-specialism of the last 50 years has been pretty damaging in giving us far too narrow view of the world, and that what is trendily called interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary working has got to be the way we look at education going into the future, to see how everything is linked to everything else, because most surely life as a whole is. Therefore, we should have our education system mimicking it.
Have you experienced a Darwinian moment when something surprised you?
We've got a project which is run by this fine friend and colleague of mine, Alexander, in the front, in Costa Rica, where we have a 10,000-acre rainforest. We've been given it by some philanthropists. The elder philanthropist, who's now dead, bought 42 farms 30 years ago, completely degraded land. He fenced it off. He said, no humans in here, the birds will shit it back to life. Today, seriously kids, it's a spiritual thing. You see this rainforest absolutely burgeoning. Every year, more life, more life, more life. We put heat cameras in there. Last year, ocelot and puma for the first time. This year, for the first time, a jaguar, one scene. It's fantastically life-affirming that in a very short period of time, we can heal things, we can make things better. And we don't have to do it on our own, because nature is pretty damn good if we stop trying to second guess it. Every time I tell that story, I feel myself feeling uplifted, because it's very, very joyous.
Tim, thank you so much. The topic tonight was inspiration, leadership, disruption, and you really are an epitome of all three, and it's been really illuminating listening to you this evening, so thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys, for coming.
The Mishcon Academy Digital Sessions. To access advice for businesses that is regularly updated, please visit mishcon.com.